And well, since President Trump's election, the left has not let up on their angry protests. So how do you calmly discuss politics with your children while teaching them to be respectful of others' views? Here to weigh in is our panel of moms, and I'll start with you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's on the front in the white shirt. Elizabeth Savetsky. She's founder of accessoriesexpert.com and mother of two. You were telling me during the break that you recently had to have a conversation with your children. Tell the folks at home about that.
So I try to find ways to talk to my two daughters who are 4 and 5 years old about what's going on in the world and what's important to our family. And I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, where the politics could not be more different than they are here in New York City. And it's important for me to expose my daughters to both worlds because I want them to know that not everyone in our great country of America believes the same things. And we can have different viewpoints and be respectful of each other. And then when they encounter situations of controversy, like recently we were at the Israel Day Parade and saw protesters, and I explained to them that not everyone has the same perspective and we don't have to, but it's our job to do our homework and do our research and find out the truth for ourselves and then take a stance. And at the end of the day, I just want my children to care and not be passive. That would be a victory for me.
That sounds great. All right, Darby Fox is behind you. She's a child and adolescent family therapist. Do you give Elizabeth an A? Did she handle that well?
Yes, she did.
How do we have these conversations with our children?
It's important to expose them to it and have conversations around politics, but more around the topics and what might their opinion be, kind of explain what the issue is, and then let them develop their own ideas. And that's a more important way, especially with younger kids, to start to talk about politics.
Okay, Kathy Barnett's on the front row, radio show host and Fox News contributor.
Yes.
How do you talk to your children about
We
politics?
talk about it regularly.
And you talk about topics specifically?
We talk about topics. We talk about some hot potato topics like kneeling during the national anthem. Why are people saying that they're kneeling and what the real reasons are? And we talk about politics because it's kind of like talking about the birds and the bees to your children. We want them to get the facts at home and versus going out into the culture, which they can get a lot of misleading, salacious, hyperbolic kind of information. And especially in the Black community, I think I have an obligation where we have the Black community typically voting in a large blind block for failed Democratic policies that have, from my perspective, have almost decimated the Black community. So I think as a Black mother, I have an obligation to talk to my children specifically about some of these policies of abolishing ICE, rushing to the border, trying to take in more illegals, things such of that nature, being very intentional about them.
Okay, Erica Comazar is behind you. She's an author of the book Being There, Why Prioritizing Motherhood in the First 3 Years Matters. So obviously, I mean, if you have a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, or 3-year-old like you write in the book, it's probably too early to talk specifically about politics.
A little bit early, but
at what age? What age do we start talking to them about the specifics?
Well, by school age, they're starting to ask questions. So, you always want to answer the questions that your children have, and our children are exposed to a great deal today because of TV and what they see and what they hear from other adults. But what I would say is talking politics with your children that are school age and above is a great way to teach things like critical thinking and to teach your value system, as long as you do it in a non-judgmental, open-minded way where you allow them to have their own views. It's an interesting way to develop their minds.
Okay, Dr. Hafiz in the back row. She is a neuropsychologist and mother of twins who are 3 years old, 2 little boys. What's your thought? What are your feelings about this with your experience?
I think if you keep the developmental and cognitive stage of a child in mind, I think having political, social discussions can be very enlightening, and I think it can be very important for a child to develop not only viewpoints, but problem-solving skills, challenging them to see the world from a different point of view. I think you mentioned the election. I think even for adults, I think it was very eye-opening to see, especially living in New York, that we live in a bubble. We had no idea, at least in New York, I had no idea how the rest of the country felt. I felt very differently. People I knew felt very differently. And it's very important to have these discussions and for your children to actually understand and be compassionate with the strife of the people who feel differently than you. You know, and I think from a developmental standpoint, I think the social developmental discussions are very important to developing your viewpoint and just growing.
Yeah, if you live in New York, you have to realize there's a whole other country out there. Elizabeth and I know that growing up in the South, and the views are very different, but it is nice to have an open mind, listen to other people, and not be so angry. Ladies, thank y'all so much. Have a great weekend. All right.